Hi, Christine. Thank you so much for being here today. It is truly an honor, and I'm so excited about having you share your story with AW. So, thank you. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I do love sharing my story because there are a lot of people that need hope these days.
Absolutely. And, the more I do this work, the more I feel that we can all use inspiration on any given day. So, these conversations, trust me, serve as just encouragement for me as well. So,
Good,
thank you.
good.
So I will start by saying this, and I have said this to you before. Your story is inspiring, and I have read some of it. I've read about your diagnosis back in, was it 2012?
Mhm.
You were diagnosed with an aggressive cancer, and you've had multiple surgeries, years of, I think it was 15 months of chemo.
Yes, 15 months.
And I get goosebumps, which I get all the time when I'm talking um, to amazing women. But I can read all this information, I
Exactly.
can absorb it, I can empathize, but there really is no better way than for you who actually had the experience to just share with us a little bit about your journey, or at least to simplify it, what was the most challenging aspect of the journey and the biggest lesson. That way you can condense it.
That's a loaded question. I love it. Well, let me start with sharing a little bit about my story for people who don't know. My name is Christine Handy, and I have a book called Walk Beside Me, which is currently being made into a film. And it's not a plug for my book. It's what I'm saying is the story is really,
I was
really
going
long.
to ask you, don't worry. Go ahead.
Well, my story is really long and it's complicated, but my journey started when I was a child and I started modeling at a very, very young age. And that became my career for, well, it's been 40 years and I still do model now. But my my journey started with a lot of self discovery when I was very young because I was trying to figure out where I fit into the modeling world and where I fit into society. And so by the time I started to get sick, my first brush with death was at 35. I had a colon resection and I went into the surgery knowing it was a major surgery to have part of your colon removed. But I woke up in the recovery room with a port in my neck. I was 35. I didn't even know what a port was, and a blood bag above my head. And I didn't have my contacts in, so I didn't know. I thought it was blood because it was dark red, but I was in so much pain because the doctor had cut me from hip to hip, because when I was in that surgery, when he was taking out part of my colon, he nicked a vein in one of my bones. And interestingly enough, because I was modeling, he didn't want to cut me wide open, which he tried not to do. So he was in there orthoscopically looking for where he had cut me, but blood was pooling and pooling for about 30 minutes. And I almost bled to death on the table because he was trying to keep from cutting me wide open because I was a model. And what turned out to be a disaster because I almost bled to death on the table. And then I had a blood transfusion during surgery. I had, I don't know, thousands of stitches because he had to cut me open in an emergency. And so he couldn't move muscles and he couldn't move organs. He just literally sliced me open. And that was my first brush with death. And even after that, I was like, oh my gosh, like, okay, I scar really well and the scar was little and it was okay for me, but I still was addicted to the applause from society, even though I wasn't working as a model as much. I had just been trained to care so much about that. And don't get me wrong, it's not anybody's fault. It's not the industry's fault. It was me reaching for who I was from the outside. And I was dependent on that outside. I was dependent on the outside relationships and the outside applause and the bigger job I got for modeling, the bigger campaign I got, the more I wanted a bigger one than that. And so it was never enough. And I didn't know that at the time. It's really easy to look back and see that. So by the time I was diagnosed with cancer, which was my darkest moment, I was 41 years old and no family history of cancer. And no reason why I would have gotten it. I was a self-proclaimed athlete and I was a model and a mother, and I'm allergic to sugar. So there was really no rhyme or reason for me to get it other than possibly stress. And so when I was diagnosed with cancer, by that point, I knew I was going to lose my hair. I knew I was going to ultimately lose my beauty. And I was like, forget this. I'm not even going to fight for my life. I was so addicted to the society label that I had, grown used to.
Right.
And so I was like, I can't even start chemotherapy because it doesn't matter. I felt like I was sucking the energy and the love and the attention from my family because I've had these illnesses, and I didn't want to ask for help because my pride and my ego was so faltered. It was my pride and my ego was screwed up in a way where I was, ashamed to ask for help. And so when I was diagnosed with cancer, I knew that I would need a ton of help because I was already kind of sickly and I was already underweight, and I just couldn't do it. And so what happened was I decided that, I wasn't going to fight for my life. And my friends came in and I started telling them this. And I said, I'm a weight for you guys. I'm not an asset. I'm a liability. And they were like, what are you talking about? You are a liability. And someday your story is going to help other people. And I just couldn't believe them at the time because I really did believe that my only position in this world was determined by my external, right? And I didn't even know who I was inside because I didn't take the opportunity to get the introspection that I needed to do over the years. And so finally my friends had convinced me to fight for my life, and I ended up really wanting to fight for my life at that point because I was like, okay, well, if I'm all in, I'm really in, and I am going to write the story, and I'm going to, serve other people, and I'm going to inspire other people with the story because there's so much trauma and there's so much craziness. But going back to your question, my darkest moment was the day I was diagnosed with cancer. I barely remember that day. And, to get a phone call like that, which is so unnerving, is so obviously troubling. And I was home alone and I didn't have that kind of support. And so that was my darkest moment. And then, to be honest with you, because that was so dark for me, and because that was the third major illness that I had, that was almost like a month after was almost my defining moment, because it was like when I decided to fight for my life, not only that was I all in, but that was 10 years ago. And
Wow.
what I've accomplished since that point, I don't even know how to measure it. It's incredible. And it's not because it's self-serving to me at all. It's not about Christine Handy. It's not about me. It's not about what this looks like. It's about my story. It's about serving women. It's about serving others. And how can we do that? We have to do it. You can write the book, you can have the magazine, you can do it on social media, you can do it as a mentor, you can do it in person, you can do it on the stage, which I do, all of that. And it's, again, because I went from being this very self-involved person to being to being only about serving other people. But that transformation is where the value is, right? And if I hadn't been so dependent on society, maybe I wouldn't know how to be so serving, right? Those two things are so opposite. And so I love being able to share my story because I don't like the trauma and the pain that I went to and continue to go through because I have chronic pain. But I do love I love to inspire and help others.
I love that. And we need a lot of that today. So during my own journey, and I think you can relate to this, I am still learning because it's a hard thing to accept, but I'm learning to embrace my pain and use it as a motivator instead of allowing it to control me. And like I said, it's constant work. I still have pain. I still have, things that I'm dealing with. And I just have to continuously remind myself this is part of the process.
Right.
But the pain has helped me push forward out of some of the darkest moments in my own life. And I wanted to know, and I think I know the answer. Have you experienced something similar? And can you share a bit about just a moment where you have it's almost like it's I used to think we have one awakening, but it's not one awakening. It's
Right.
many of them. So I sort of want to pick your brain and maybe take us to a moment in time that it's not too much for you, obviously, where you can pinpoint great pain that you've been able to transform into something great or positive.
Well, I mean,
There's
there's,
so many.
yeah,
I
no,
know.
no, but okay. So I'll give you a very good example.
Okay.
I, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I had a mastectomy, and I was so sick during chemotherapy that I didn't do a double mastectomy, but I knew that I was going to do a mastectomy a couple years down the road when I was better. So a couple years went by, I got healthy, and I did the second mastectomy. During the second mastectomy, they put new implants in that were they were textured, so they stayed. When you have a mastectomy, you have no breast tissue, so the implants, they kind of move around in the cavity, and it's very uncomfortable. So when they put these new implants in me, and they were textured, and they stayed, right there, and they were much more comfortable. They were not causing me pain, and I was just so happy about them, and I loved them. I'd never had implants before. I just had my natural breasts. And so I went from having, my breasts removed to implants, and I could handle that, right?
Right.
And so from 2015 until 2020, I really loved that chest. I mean, of course, I would have preferred to have my original chest, but that's okay. I mean, that was taken, and I don't want to carry that baggage. And so during COVID, when everybody was locked down and I was locked down as well, the beginning of March, I had something happen to my implant, and I was in the hospital for about 5 days with, nobody there because nobody could be in the hospital, and people were really afraid. Like, I remember coming back to my building, and people were very afraid of me. They were like, you can't come out of, your where you live because you were just in the hospital. And I had to have my doctor call it was such a crazy time for everybody, but especially if you were in and out of the hospital. And I had a staph infection in that implant because the implants were recalled by the FDA. So here I have these incredible implants that I love after I've lost my breasts. And then the FDA recalls the implants because the implants that they put in me, the textured implants, were causing breast cancer. So I was like, what? Now, this had been like, I think at that point, that was my 20th non-elective surgery. I've never had an elective surgery. It's all non-elective. And so back in March in 2020, I had the staph infection because of that implant. And then I was on massive antibiotics, got out of the hospital, had a PICC line with more antibiotics for 2 weeks. So, I mean, we're talking about continued pain and continued medical situations. And this is now 8 years after cancer. And so then April came. At the end of April, the same thing happened to the breast. I went back into the hospital for 5 days. Now it was worse. The country was more locked down. So now we couldn't even have like food in our room. It was a weird time to be in the hospital. There were very few patients on the floor. And I know this because I used to walk around the hospital floor trying to help other people who were in there by themselves. And so I'd walk around the floor and go into rooms and see if anybody was there and say, how can I help you? How can I serve you? How can I pray for you? Whatever. Because I knew how lonely it was for me to be in the hospital that time, and scary. I didn't want to get COVID. And I also had a massive infection that they couldn't figure out how to get rid of. So I got out of the hospital in April, and they sent me home with some oral antibiotics. And then 2 months later, June of 2020, I get off an airplane. I come home, and I'm stripping all my clothes off because I'm trying to get in the shower because I'm just feeling dirty and whatever. And my shirt is sticking to my chest. And I was like, I can't believe I sweat this much. And why is it only on the left side? And I wasn't feeling well. Like I work all the time. So I wasn't looking at my phone on the Uber on the way home. I wasn't going through emails. I wasn't responding to texts. And I could tell that I started to have a fever. And so I'm walking to the shower. I'm trying to take this off. And I finally get my shirt off that was sticking to me. And there was green pus that was oozing out of my breasts all the way down, like through my pants into my tennis shoes. I mean, it's not funny, but right now I have to laugh because I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I had 28 rounds of chemotherapy. I had 20 non-elective surgeries. Now my arm was fused, my colon resection. And I was like looking up at God going, really? Come on. So I called my oncologist and she FaceTimed me, and because she wanted to see what I looked like. And when she saw me, she goes, I'm going to send an ambulance right now. And I was like, I'm not going to the hospital. I said, I've been in and out of the hospital for 15 days since COVID started. And you guys told me I was fine. Every time I got out of the hospital, you said I was fine and pat me on the shoulder and said, sent me on my way. I go, you guys have really let me down again. And she goes, this is not a joke. This is a very serious situation. I think you have a MRSA infection. And if you don't go to the hospital tonight, you could be in critical condition by tomorrow. And I said to her, I mean, of course I'm crying. And I'm like, what? Like, anyway, I end up going to the hospital. By the time I got to the hospital, I was admitted immediately, and within like 2 hours, I was in emergency surgery. I did have a MRSA infection. It could have killed me. And they excavated my breast, and that was it. I had that because it had penetrated from the implant through my skin. They had to cut out so much skin that there was no way to replace the implants. There was no way to reconstruct. And I was like in the hospital going by myself because there's COVID. You can't have anybody. And I was like, I think that was what pushed me over the edge, because when I was going through chemotherapy, I had a ton of women by my side, a ton of family by my side. But when you go during COVID, and I think people can relate to this who were sick with COVID or with something else during COVID, when you're alone, it's a completely different story. When you have nobody, I mean, I could FaceTime somebody, but I was so sick. I had 103 fever and they just excavated my breast cavity and I had stitches everywhere and I had a drain and you can't even imagine what it was. And I think for me, that was my kind of one of my breaking points. And I thought I'd already been broken back in cancer. And I thought to myself, like, haven't I gained a few chips by helping other people? And the truth is, none of us are immune to any sort of health issue. None of us are immune to any sort of problem in this world at all. We don't store up chips like to be given any sort of accolades down the road. We have to wake up every day and help other people and be and not self-involved because just for the act of doing it. And so it was then where I realized, like, I got to pick myself out of this because this is dangerous for me to feel this bad.
Mm.
And I didn't care about what people were going to think of this. I cared about what I was going to think of it. And I had never in all of breast cancer thought that would ever be completely flat or concave. I'm really concave. And so it was a really emotionally traumatic space. And I'm laying in the hospital and after the excavation, and a doctor came in with mask, everybody was masked up and you could hardly see anybody. And this doctor came in and he was like, I know you, who you are. I know your story. I know I've seen you on news or whatever. I can't remember what he said, but he knew who I was. And he said, and I just want you to know that my mother passed away from breast cancer and she was a big fan of yours and what you're doing with breast cancer. And he said something like, don't let this break you. And I couldn't even lift my head from my hospital bed because I had 103 fever and I was so sick. And at that point I was like, I just can't take anymore. And I didn't even say anything to him. I kind of blinked, I had a mask on. I kind of blinked. I could hardly breathe in the hospital after that surgery. And I remember that guy because I think he knew, when you're in the medical field and you see somebody come in that's had so much like me, I think he knew or he could sense, that I'd kind of stopped talking to the staff. I'd kind of like shut down, not just because I was so sick, but also because he could tell that there was something going on. And I think I know when you don't have people helping you, when you don't have a courage net, which we all need, that's when people lose their self-confidence. That's when people lose their will to live. Yeah. And we have to be that courage net for other people. Even if we can't be there in person, it can't just be over social media. It can't just be over texting. You have to be physically be able to see people to help them. And I think for me last summer was a huge moment in my life and in the way that I serve other people, because it almost gave me fierce determination to do more. And I'm sorry for the longevity of this story, but so for a few months, I was barely able to go in my closet because I was like, I don't even want to put on my dresses. I have no idea what I'm going to be able to wear. So I wore like t-shirts, baggy t-shirts. And well, first of all, I had stitches everywhere and it was super uncomfortable. But once that started to heal, I didn't want to face everything that I had to give away. And it's not because I was attached to those dresses, but I was like attached to having a chest. I didn't want to lose anything again. I lost my wrist. I lost my breast to breast cancer. I was like, I just didn't want to lose anymore. And so I finally was able to go through my closet and take some stuff out. And I gave it to this charity called Cancer Cartel. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to use this pain to help other people, because Cancer Cartel, they sell high-end clothes to, well, actually right now they've just partnered with The Real, but they sell it to people on their website, and then they take 100% of the proceeds and they pay cancer patients bills.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, I can now start giving clothes to this organization. They can sell and they can make money and they can help other people. Great. So then I thought to myself, well, what else can I do? And so I started to get all these messages on social media about how I just kind of flaunt this chest and don't cover it up, and I don't wear prosthetics, and I'm not ashamed of it. And if I could show you the thousands of people that have messaged me saying, okay, well, I've stopped wearing a sports bra to bed with my husband now. I've stopped wearing a prosthetic, and I went out today for the first time in 5 years without anything covering me up. And I've had thousands of messages, and I'm like, you know what? I'm the person that's supposed to like show that this is incredibly beautiful. And I'm the person that's out here to show it doesn't matter that this was stolen too. It doesn't matter that this looks different, that I don't necessarily look like the typical woman. It's okay. And so I went one step further, and I woke up one morning and I was like, I got to do something more because I can't find a bathing suit to wear. I'm sure other people can't either. And so I went into my medicine drawer and I took out an ace bandage. I think you've seen me post this stuff. And I started to work with it and try to wrap it in a way that I could make a bathing suit. And then I went to Michael's and MJ's Designs, and I bought ribbons and I bought all this stuff so that I could make a bathing suit. And then I called this bathing suit brand, and this is an interesting moment because I knew that I had an idea. I knew that the idea could work. But my brain went to the old self, like the 10-year ago self, where it said, you shouldn't call them. What if they say no? You're going to be embarrassed. And what if they don't really care about breast cancer patients? What if all these like things came in my head? And I said to myself, because I could hear these thoughts, this old tape playing. And I said to myself, who cares if they say no? You're trying to serve other people. Let's just give it a shot. And so I called the CEO of this bathing suit line. And I said, I have an idea. And she literally said, anything you're a part of, I want to try to be a part of too. So we met, and I brought the ace bandage and I wrapped my excavated chest up in it. And we partnered, and we now have a bathing suit line coming out in November for people like me who have no chest. And this bathing suit, will be accessible for everybody, can really use it. But when you don't have a chest and you have bathing suits that have like cushion in it and stuff, that like if you go into the water, it gets inverted. So it looks really weird. And so if you don't have that, you wouldn't know. And so we're trying to make a brand that's accessible for people in my position, but also for anybody. And it's a market that nobody's done before. And so I was like, okay, if I had to go through all that pain to do this, and this, I'm okay with that.
Wow.
But you gotta have the courage to do the steps to help other people, right? I could have had this situation happen to me and crumble and been paralyzed by it and not sent my stuff to the Cancer Cartel and not made the bathing suit and not flaunted it. I could have been ashamed of it, but my self-esteem isn't wrapped up into the world. My self-esteem is wrapped up into my faith. And so it's unshakable. You can't stop somebody that has that kind of root in their self-esteem. But that's where you got to get to. You got to get to a self-esteem where you're like, it doesn't matter. You know, if people don't like me, I like me.
I love that. I just, uh, between your resilience and your faith and your self belief, and I mean, it's incredible strength. And it's sort of, I know for myself, I mean, I think about, the things day to day that I may complain about, and a lot of us do. And it doesn't even come close to everything you've been through. So thank you for enlightening. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned, I read somewhere, and I thought it was really interesting, because it's something that I think about a lot. But you mentioned in an interview that you found the joy in your life. And for many, true joy is elusive. It's just this thing that I don't know, that not a lot of people get to in a lifetime. And
Yeah.
I'm constantly looking for that. I'm starting to understand that it comes from within for me. But I wanted to know, what does joy look like for you today compared to, I think you've had, I wish I could say you've had you had your first act and this is your second act, but I have a feeling you have many, many acts.
Right.
But what does joy look like for you today compared to the Christine maybe 10 years ago, maybe even a year ago? What does it look like today?
You know, I used to think that joy came from going to a store and buying a new bag. I used to think,
External.
I, I did. I used to think, well, if I can get this for my birthday, or if I can get this for Christmas, or I can get, and when I was going through chemotherapy, I'm a big fan of Hermes. And when I was going through chemotherapy, my son, who's 13, um, I was, I literally had just lost my hair for chemotherapy. So I lost my hair over Thanksgiving. So now it's like 20 days after I lost my hair, and I'm trying to, I just had chemotherapy on December 22nd, and I'm so sick, and I've got mouth sores, and I'm throwing up, and I'm trying to sit there and have presents with my kids and wake up and in front of the tree. And my son, at the end of the gifts, he walked over and he gave me an orange bag, which is had an Hermes bag. And I was like, oh, fun. And in that bag was a carved cross that my son carved for me. Now, I thought it was like a bracelet from Hermes. And it was in that moment where I was like, this is the nicest gift anybody has ever given to me in my entire life. And I almost overlooked what was in the package because of the box that it was in. Right? That was a profound moment for me and for my family. Now, that was 10 years, that was like 9 years ago. When I started to speak as a speaker, I was hired by the state of Florida to start speaking in prisons about 4 years ago. And after my first speaking event in a prison in Florida with all male inmates, so like 1,000 inmates and me outside in this courtyard, everybody's sitting, and I am standing in front of all these inmates thinking to myself, what could I possibly contribute to all these male inmates? I mean, typically I speak to women's groups and, medical facilities with men and women, but I've never really sat in front of 1,000 men. And after that speech, I'm going to guess and say 200 of those men lined up to hug me or to talk to me. And I realized that that was joy, not the people that lined up. The fact that I could inspire inmates in a jail, that was joy for me. They didn't care, that I was a guest model. They didn't care that, I had a Prada bag in my closet. All they cared about was hope. And I was standing in front of them, willing to share the hope and the pain that I had been through. And I was like, I want to do that every day of my life. I want to serve other people. And joy became not from money and not exterior things. It became from that spirit of serving, but not for self, again, not not for self, but for selfless. And that's where joy comes in. I was really happy for many years, you know, getting that stuff and getting society's accolades. I was happy, but it wasn't joyful. And I couldn't figure that out. I couldn't figure out why I wasn't joyful until I went into my darkest moments and until I realized what life was about. Listen, there is no U-Haul behind the hearse.
Mm.
There is no U-Haul behind the hearse.
Where did you find that? Is a genius quote, by the way.
I mean,
oh my God, that's like put it on a t-shirt. That is good.
If
I have to write it down.
and listen, I know that all these manufacturers of these beautiful products need to make money, but we have to put that into perspective. You know, it can't be an idol to us. What we worship, we become. And when people realize that, every single day I wake up and I'm like, what am I going to worship today? I know who I worship, and it's not me. I don't worship myself. I don't worship other people. And so when you stop worshiping the stuff that's fleeting and that is temporal and can be taken away. My beauty was stolen when I was 41 years old with chemotherapy. I can't depend on that. And I don't want to ever again. And I won't. That's how my self-esteem is unshakable, because I'm not worshiping that, right? There's the difference, you know?
You definitely have. It's this energy, just this, it's almost like peacefulness about you. It's very rare.
Thank you.
You see, I told you I was going to come back to this. You wrote the book Walk Beside Me, which I haven't read yet.
Yes.
But I will. And it's being turned into a film. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And I wanted you to give us just a little, for those that haven't read it, including myself, just a little blurb on the story that you share, and if you could share any news on the film.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the story is a fictional depiction of my life. And I think the reason why it's been so popular is because it really shows the transformation of that person who didn't have a very high self-esteem, which I believe most women don't. To that courageous person, but through going through all of that trauma. And so it's also, I think that more of the reason I wrote the book was to show women supporting women, because when I was going through chemotherapy and my arm and all the trauma with that, you know, the world makes women look like we're catty and we're pulling each other apart, especially on TV and cinema and all those places, which, by the way, happens. I'm not saying it doesn't. But I didn't experience that. When I needed help from my friends, they poured into me. They gave up their lives. They gave up their resources to save my life. And when you have people that do that, it changes you, because then you feel that courage to go out and do the same. And so when I was writing my book, I was like, how can I show this story in a way that shows people what they did for me, and almost like a resource for people to learn how to do that. And so people will say to me like, wow, you had amazing friends. And I was like, we all can be that, and we all deserve that. This is just a different way to do it. And let me show you how it's done. And so that's kind of the core being of my book. And the film is called Willow, the feature film. And it's an interesting story. I always wanted the book to be a film. And I wrote the last chapter. When you read it, I wrote the last chapter to kind of, nobody can really figure out the ending. Like, they're like, what'd she do? Did she live? Did she die? Like, what happened?
Okay.
And so right after I wrote the book, I had somebody, an entertainment lawyer, approach me and asked me if he could do kind of a screenplay on it. I won't bore you with the details, but we had incredible conversations and it went pretty far, but then it fizzled out. And then 2 years later, I had another group out of Miami come approach me, these producers, and they said, you know, we're going to pour like all this effort into your name and to get you a bigger audience, and then we're going to announce the film. And I was like, okay, I'll sign up for that. You know, getting my story out there more, I want that all day long, because I know how I'm inspiring people. And so we were, you know, it probably were in talks and doing this for about 6 months, and then that fizzled out. And then about a month after that, and I always, the whole time I was like, the film is, it's just the wrong people. It's going to happen. I have complete, I had complete faith. And about a month later, an Oscar award winning screenplay writer, and he's won Oscars for directing films as well, called me and said, this is what I normally charge to write a screenplay, but I just want to be a part of this project. So I'll write the screenplay for free. This movie is important. Your book is incredible. Your life has, so much power in what you've gone through. And he wrote the screenplay in 6 weeks, and we've been working on the project ever since. Wow. And, COVID stopped the project. We were supposed to start filming May of 2020. So we're just trying to get it back. We're trying to restart it right now. But it's incredible. The script is so beautiful. And the script really mirrors my book. There are so many books that are made into film where it doesn't really resemble the book that well, which is, it is what it is. But the film, the screenplay really resembles my book. And so I'm very excited about it.
Oh, that sounds so exciting. I can't wait.
Well, you can imagine, if I can inspire this many people, imagine if the film comes out and how many people I can inspire with my faith and my grit, my grace and perseverance. Like, people need it.
Absolutely. I think we are just in a precarious time. So absolutely, we'll be looking for that. Yeah. So I can talk to you for hours. But one of the things that sort of drew me to you was reading about everything you've gone through and just trying to understand the magnitude of your resilience. I mean, it really goes to show that the human spirit is limitless. And I'm happy that I'm able to talk to you today and that you're here with us.
Thank you.
So I have 2 more questions.
Okay.
And the first one is, you've gone through all these difficult times, and I'm sure you've learned so much about yourself. It's one of the things for me that it's scary, but at the same time, it's exciting to know that I'm still sort of peeling the onion. So what's one of the things that you have learned about yourself that has surprised you?
I would say I was very dependent on interpersonal relationships. And, I was married for a very, very long time, and all of my illnesses didn't help that relationship. And I never could imagine that I could be without a intimate relationship. I was like, I didn't feel like I could be on my own. I had a boyfriend in high school. I had a boyfriend in college. I got married right out of college. And I just was kind of like, I don't know, I had that codependency thing going on for my whole life, even as a child, I remember that. And so about 5 years ago, when my husband and I separated and I lived alone, I really struggled with that, maybe even more than the illnesses, because the illnesses you can't control. But, being codependent is kind of, it had its claws in me. And I was used to that. And that was the story of my life. And I wasn't willing to give that up. And I didn't want to be isolated and have to get to know myself even more. And once I got over that uncomfortableness, which took many months, by the way, codependency you can't just turn a switch and turn it off. It takes a long time, and man, it's hard work.
It's like reprogramming.
It's reprogramming. And for many, oh my gosh, many years. And we're not supposed to live alone. We're supposed to live in companionship. We're supposed to have a partner. That's biblical. But when I was put in a position where I had to be alone, and I went through that mess and that mud and that horrible, I felt like an orphan. And I had anxiety, and
Oh no, I totally get it. I think and I don't want to say specifically for women, but I think that a lot of us, it's almost like it's almost innate. I don't
It's
I
expected.
mean, it is.
It's expected.
And you look for those external anchors because for me, they're anchors. It's my daughter, it's my boyfriend, it's,
Right.
whatever it is. But finding that anchor within yourself,
Mhm.
which you have done, is, I think it's the greatest gift we can give ourselves. And it's extremely difficult. And it could take a lifetime to
It's yeah.
figure it out.
Well, fortunately for me, when I was forced into that position and I had already gone through all that trauma, again, it was not easy, but I got to a place where all I did was work and I filled that space with helping others, and it became like just normal for me. And so now to put myself out there into relationships, I'm like, this just feels weird. Almost went from one extreme to another because I'd rather be doing interviews. I'd rather be talking to you. This is like, it's Friday, isn't it Friday today?
It's Friday.
I mean, I have like 3 interviews tomorrow. I don't care about going out. I care
Well,
about,
well, just remember that this is just my opinion, but you are a beautiful being, and it will be selfish for you not to share yourself.
right. Well, it's coming. That it is coming, but I just think that, a lot of people, and here's maybe the biggest message, a lot of people, when they go from being codependent and are forced into a space where they can't be codependent, they pick other codependencies, which maybe aren't so healthy.
That's
And so
true.
for me, the codependency I picked was working. And, and right now I'm trying to rebalance it because, of course, you can't just work all the time. Like I said, we're supposed to be in companionship with other people. And so I'm working on that. I'm untraining the 12-hour days where I'm like, okay, do more. I can do more. I can do more. Um,
No.
but it is a balance. It is a balance. But I will tell you that it's so freeing to be out of a codependent relationship, which, by the way, was my fault. I don't blame anybody else. That's so freeing to be. And it's okay to go through that interpersonal mess. It doesn't last forever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, one of the things that I like to do, because a lot of these interviews get very deep, and I'm just like, I'm a very philosophical person. I like to think about life and about, all the things that we face. But one of the things that I like to do at the end of every interview is ask for some sort of positive message. So, my question for you is, can you share some advice, mantra, affirmation, or some words that have helped you during the toughest moments of your life that may help someone who's watching?
I'll give you a couple. So my self-affirmation every day is let go and let God.
I
Because
love that one.
I
Yes.
mean, it's just, when I'm put in difficult situations or I'm in pain in my arm and I'm, angry about, somebody or something, and I think about that weight on my shoulders, I'm like, get rid of that backpack, get rid of that pain and sorrow, because it means the only person that hurts is yourself, by the way. And I don't want to continue to hurt myself. And so I allow that backpack to just kind of wash off me and just say, okay, let go and let God. And I just give it to him. Now that's a practice. People hear that and they go, okay, well, I'm going to say let go and let God. It takes a long time. But ultimately, when we have bitterness and we we don't forgive people, it's just a backpack that we carry that we're not supposed to. So that's one. The other thing that I really love to tell people, and this is so important, is when you react to people, things, situations all day long, you react out of 3 ways. Everybody, it's universal: malice, compassion, or pride. That's it. And I'll explain them: malice, compassion, or pride. So I'll give you an example.
Okay.
I have a few, this is a good working example. I have a fused arm. So I'm in chronic pain. I'm in constant pain, but I try to work. I mean, I do work out. So I was on the beach and I was doing a workout with my trainer, and the little beach attendant who gives us water was in his hut and it was hot. And I was really in a lot of pain. So I said to my trainer, can you please go get me a water? I'm hot. I need to take a break. And so he like runs over to the beach attendant, and the beach attendant looks at him and says, you're not a resident. I can only give the resident water. So I look over and I can kind of see what's happening. Now, the guy that was in the little box, who was giving out water, his pride was getting in the way. He could have given my trainer the water, no big deal, but his pride and his ego was in the way. My trainer was acting out of compassion for me, so he went to go get the water. So when I see this whole thing going on, I'm like, I'm going to march over there and say, this is my trainer, and I'm going to give him peace of my mind. And I stopped myself as I'm walking over there. I stopped myself and I said to myself, I can respond in malice, which I'm about to, compassion for the guy, or ego, my pride. Doesn't he know who I am? Right? So I walk over, I slow my steps, I walk over and I say to the beach attendant, let me introduce you to my trainer. This is Josh, and he works out with me every Monday. And if you don't mind giving him my water, you know me, I'm in pain, and just would really help me out. Well, the beach attendant completely shifted, like his pride walked away, and he was like, no problem. My trainer was like, phew, this wasn't, nobody's temper was raised, because my malice, which was, scooting over to the beach attendant, I had stopped myself. And I know that it's a silly example, but every single day when we're faced with challenges, our reaction, if you remember, can either be out of compassion for the person who we're reacting to, who we don't know how they feel. We may think we know how they feel, but we don't. Out of pride and ego, our pride and ego, or theirs, or out of malice. Oh, I'm going to get him back. Road rage is out of malice. So if you can think about those things in every single situation of your life, including with your daughter and with your boyfriend and in work, then you will start to react differently. Now, I stop myself all the time if I react out of pride or malice. I don't ever respond out of that. I always respond out of compassion, even if the person is wrong, even if the person has hurt me in some way, because it doesn't help me to react out of malice. It doesn't help me to react out of pride. And I'm trying to help me, and you're trying to help you. So if we're constantly reacting out of compassion, our life completely changes, and it changes the people around us. It changes the people we've reacted to, and it changes the people that are watching us react. So that's my best advice. I love it.
I love that. But I'm sure that takes a lot of practice. I know for myself, I'm thinking of situations and people. I'm like, I don't know, that'll take a little time.
You know what though? Once you start practicing it, it's going to get easier, and you won't believe how it shifts in your spirit and in your heart. You will have less anxiety, you will have less stress, and you will just live a peaceful life. And the people around you, they will feel that peace, and you will emulate it for everybody who comes into your life. That's a gift.
Well, you're a gift. Thank you so much for joining us. I love our conversation, and I'm sure we'll have some other conversations off camera. Thank you, Christine. Bless you, and I will speak to you soon. Thank you.